Here's Mark and Suzanne revolutionizing radio.
Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Mark and Suzanne Show. I am Mark. She is Suzanne. And we're glad you joined us here. We come to the microphones as regularly as we do, both for a couple of reasons. One, to argue our point of view and to assert that we actually do have ideas over here to both revolutionize radio, but also revolutionize your thinking about the problems we are facing in this hashtag exceptional union we live in. But we also come here because we just have a personal interest in helping, in serving, if you will. And so we're glad you joined us here. We are going to continue to break down the barriers that block us from thinking. We are going to continue to gore sacred cows. Folks, there is no need to argue constitutionality of many things at this point because it just doesn't matter. The reality is the Constitution is whatever those in power say it is. And you and I know that. I mean, this is how did we get to 7 of 9 politically connected lawyers in black dresses in 1973? And yes, it is black dresses. I intend to do everything I can to delegitimize this system of government. 7 men decided it is constitutional to murder a baby in a womb. And I'm supposed to put my hand over my heart, and I'm supposed to stand, and I'm supposed to celebrate that? Are you kidding me? Folks, this is the kind of clear thinking we all have got to get to. If we are going to have any chance at fixing the mess that we're in, we've got to become clear thinkers as we go forward. I want to welcome to the show Suzanne, my favorite co-host. Well, my only co-host. So. How are you,
Good
Suzanne?
morning, my friend. I'm in some excellent company. You had some amazing co-hosts, Josh, and who's the other one?
Scott.
And what? Yes, Josh.
Scott, right.
They were amazing. So I am really honored to be able to pick up where they left off and moved on. And, you mentioned, why do we do this? It is a form of service. None of us right now are making any kind of money. And I think, it's a beautiful day. I could be maybe doing something other than reading this article I want to talk about tomorrow. But we're compelled. I think just like it's for me, it's a real primal feeling. Just like who explains why a salmon swims upstream? I feel compelled to try and make this place better for those that are going to be here when we leave. And someday when they look back, they're going to ask, didn't anybody try to stop this? Where were the Sam Adams? Where were the Paul Reveres? Where were the Bonhoeffers? Those are some lofty standards. Am I comparing us to them? No. But, I had a discussion with our friend Dwayne Stovall, who's running for United States Senate in the state of Texas. And he said, maybe the best we can hope to do is preserve the truth for posterity. And for whatever reason, people are responding. They want to hear what we're saying. Our numbers are growing. People are turning away where they could be listening to something else right now. They're listening to us live. Yeah. They could be listening to Fox News. They could be listening to CNN or other podcasts. But here they are because we're offering something unique. And you mentioned the Constitution. We're going to have a discussion today about government. And can government really limit itself like it's supposed to, like the Constitution's supposed to? I want to encourage people to download. We have an app, the Cerberus Radio Network app. It's available at the Google Play Store for the Android platform. If you go there and listen, it's on Radio Co. and we have a loop. You can also go to SoundCloud, find our SoundCloud page, and you can download our shows. Pick what you want to hear. You can download, you can share them. Even we're on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. We're also on Twitter. I encourage you, go to Mark Creslin's page, go to my page. We have stuff that is always public. Our producer, Jeff, is always putting stuff up on our Facebook pages. We have a fan page called CRN. Follow us, read what we have to say. We're going to upset some people. A friend of mine, Mark, this is funny, tagged me in a post yesterday. Case coming out from California. California is actually considering doing away with their bail system.
Oh, really?
Oh, they're outraged. Oh my goodness, we can't have that. We got to keep these people locked up. Well, you have to understand, if you read the article, there are provisions for keeping those that are habitual drunk drivers that have caused accidents, violent offenders, sexual predators, to keep them incarcerated so they're not a danger to the public. How many people are having to pay bail for victimless crimes? They haven't hurt anybody. And the fact is, it is very disproportionate against the poor people in California. I worked in the criminal justice system. I was a criminal defense attorney. I saw how people had to struggle for bail money when they were caught with some marijuana. Now that's not a problem there, but we still have the issue with people getting arrested for drugs, for getting into a fight. When, you know what? People get in fights sometimes. Does somebody always have to go to jail if there is a fight? You know, it's, and people just, the knee-jerk reaction before even seeing what this law is about and this reform is about is to just want to lock them up. You know, on a broader scale, look at what happened this week. All of a sudden, a man who used a song to parody bombing Iran, bomb, 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 is hailed as a war hero for his service. This is a man, I was telling my son, do you think the people these bombs were landing on, these people who, not just Iran, but what this man, there was never a war this man did not support. The people that were the victims at the receiving ends of these bombs, I don't think they were singing songs. Right. You know, this goes to this, you know, there was a video out a while ago. I'm going a little off on a tangent, but I'm thinking of this as we're talking about the subject. America, F yeah, showing all these bombs, all these incendiaries. Yeah, and you know, where has this gotten us any freer? Have we had any sort? I mean, what I'm seeing here is a prognostication of the founding generation saying that standing armies, as Madison said, is the bane of liberty, because from the existence of standing armies, we will have war, because the government has the tool now to force their will upon the rest of the world, on other sovereign entities. Well, we've got to finance that, so we have our taxes. And if you don't pay your taxes, somebody's going to come and point a gun at you, take you out of your home, sell your home. So we have taxes, debt, national debt. We will never statistically ever pay off the debt that we have right now. Your little grandbaby was born with, I don't know, what are we looking at, 6 figures of debt by now? Who knows at this point? Does it even matter? And then finally, the rule over the many by the few. And that's the problem. So we kind of are going to talk philosophically today about how much government do we want? How much can we get away with? Can people voluntarily associate with each other without government telling us how to do that? I'll let you run with that one a little bit, Mark.
Yeah, well, this is in my view, this is the conversation of the 21st century. It really isn't about the stupid Supreme Court and what they say. It's not about the stupid Congress and what they say. It's not about who's going to be the next president. Those conversations are baked in. And if you want to have those conversations, heck, man, go on over to Rush Limbaugh and he'll talk your ear off about it. If you want to have conversations about exploring the future and what could be, then you need to be right here with us, because these are the conversations that actually need to happen. I want to take you back to 1774 as they are slogging through trying to figure out how to deal what they were believing to themselves at that point to be tyranny from the king. They're referencing the rights of the Englishmen. They're making arguments within the current construct, right? They're there arguing why the king should not be able to do this, why they don't really have equal representation. They're making all these in the status quo, in the known paradigm. They're making arguments there. And that's where we mostly are right now, not on this show. We keep making these arguments they want us to make. They want us to argue within, as Tom Woods calls it, that 3x5 card of acceptable political opinion. They want us there. We can't be there, folks. We have to take that card and rip it up just like they did in 1775 as they began to move towards independence. The conversation shifted in many people's minds from Well, we got to claim our rights as Englishmen. We've got to demand representation. We've got to force the king to do, or the parliament to do X, Y, or Z. We've got to stand up for our rights as Englishmen. The conversation moved from that point to we have to get away from them. Now, that is not a small thing, folks. That is, in fact, it's actually captured in the Declaration of Independence. I want to read something to you real quick. It's going to be a familiar passage to you, but sometimes familiarity actually kind of brings a kind of contempt. And I don't think people actually have contempt for this document, but negligence, if that can be a kind of contempt, I think sometimes we are negligent of what really occurred in this document. I want to read this to you. They're capturing what I'm describing to you. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. Now, obviously, the monarchy had been around for quite some time. They're acknowledging you don't just willy-nilly up and flip and change governments because you want to. There really is some prudence to begin to consider about whether you really want to change your form of government. They write this. They're thinking about this at that moment. They go on to write colon or semicolon. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind is more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms which they are accustomed to. And then stop there and think about what they're saying. Yes, to be prudent, you just don't change governments willy-nilly on a dime every day. And most in history has shown that most people suffer a very long time before they decide to right themselves. Now, what is the qualifier? Jefferson now goes on to write, but prudence indeed says we don't transition governments for light and transient reasons. Experience has shown us throughout all of human history that man will suffer great evil before they will right themselves. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them to utter absolute despotism, it is their right, the people, us, it is us, the people. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Do not dismiss this. They went from arguing within the construct of the status quo, the king, the parliament, rights as English citizens, all this. They're making these art. They move from there to here. Well, we now have to transition government because there is actually a long train of abuses. And they go on to list what those long train of abuses are. Why? When as Tom Woods says, and guys, I apologize for my frustration this morning. When Tom Woods so appropriately describes the 3x5 card of acceptable political opinion, why do we insist in arguing in that 3x5 card? Why aren't we, like Suzanne alluded to earlier in the show, why aren't we like Sam Adams? Why aren't we like Thomas Jefferson? Why aren't we? Why are we so afraid to have these conversations? What is going on in our psyche that prevents us from, when you hear me read those words, Kreslins, I knew you were a secessionist all along. I knew you hate the con. Well, why is that the knee-jerk reaction? I'm sure they had their detractors back in 1774, the Tories saying, well, you don't love the king. You don't love the crown. You don't love the prestige of being a citizen of the empire. I'm sure they all took those critiques as well. I'm perfectly prepared to take those critiques. Folks, we've got to have philosophical decisions. Now, as soon as they made those, made those declarations in the document, they also had to think, what is better? Okay, we don't like this. This really sucks. We think we need to get away from it. There's a long train of abuses here. You don't just stop there. And sometimes I think when I get engaged with people on Facebook, they think, well, Kreslins, all you want to do is just is bulldoze Washington, D.C. and the Chesapeake Bay, which I actually do. But I do actually have ideas beyond that day. This this is the conversation, folks. What is better? If we recognize 63 million babies, we are now on record across human recorded history as having participating in legitimizing the largest Holocaust ever. We did it. Exceptional America did that. If we know things are bad and we think this is detestable, we have to start asking questions. What is better? What is better? And honestly, Suzanne, what I find out there in political world is a total absence of consideration of what might be better.
And that's where the conversation ends. If you point out where our politicians, where our representatives, where our court system, where this whole system has failed us. Well, you don't believe in the Constitution? No, not really. And that's from some of my LDS friends out here, or the Barton followers. Well, that came from God. You don't love America. And this is the confines in which we are stuck. People are either programmed vis-a-vis or their religious leaders, or they are a product of the education system, which of course is going to embrace the very national government that has now taken hold of it. And this is what we see, especially when you mention Tom Wood's 3x5 index card of allowable opinion. So going back to your example of the American Holocaust, in fact, when I was in Connecticut earlier this summer, and I was at a bed and breakfast, and this couple started talking to me, and we're just engaging in conversation, and she brings up how wonderful it is that now all of a sudden Ireland is having abortions. Yay! Yay! Now Ireland's killing babies too. This is a good thing. So it became understood very quickly that I was not celebratory in that regard. And we are conditioned. The 3x5 allowable index card of human abortion is Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
And anytime you try to advance a conversation on, it really should be a matter for my state to decide, and the people in our community and who are philosophically like-minded to determine for themselves whether or not we want this practice, this abhorrent practice of child human sacrifice to continue under the auspices of women's reproductive health. They love to sugarcoat everything and put it under, put whipped cream on the turd, but in this case, it's not funny because babies are being ripped apart. But the 3x5 allowable index card, or index card of allowable opinion, says, well, the Supreme Court has spoken, it is settled. So don't even think about going against that. And this is the problem. We are when you talk about these revolutionary, again, this wasn't really revolutionary. They weren't trying to throw off our values at the time. They were trying to embrace them and regain their rights. And as you mentioned, when that was no longer possible, it was time to separate. That was the purpose of the Declaration of Independence. The sentiments expressed therein may not have had legal effect, but boy, they resonate today. And here is what we have evolved to. We came about as a result of secession. We seceded from the English. We seceded from the Articles of Confederation. Now we have this Constitution and this general government that just grew up, this giant weed that came out of our Garden of Liberty has sprung up and taken over like an invasive species, choking out all the life-giving plants and saying, we're going to make it a law, federal law. We're going to call it Title 18, United States Code, Section 2385. And even though we came about as a product of a series of violent secessions, overturning of previous systems of government, it is henceforth illegal. It is a federal crime to even advocate the necessity of overthrowing us. When the Declaration was drafted, they knew that England wasn't going to say, okay, off you go. They knew there was going to be war and violence. by talking about the necessity at the time and comparing that to today's issues and another long train of abuses, which we're going to get into, are we not in violation of that statute? Ostensibly, we are. How convenient for them.
Well, and this is, somebody asked me today on my Facebook page, Mark, why don't you just say what you really mean? You want to take up arms. And no, I don't. I actually have no interest in taking up arms because I don't think we need to. See, I am not advocating for the overthrow of the federal government. I don't advocate. You will never hear those words out of my mouth. I'm not in violation of that. I am advancing federalism, which is a system of government that we were built upon. And as you said, it began in 1776 with an act of secession. They didn't overthrow the king. They threw him off. Those are totally different concepts. Now, certainly the megalomaniacs in D.C. want to conflate the two. They're the same thing because they want to scare the public into even talking about this.
Well, and that's what's so scary about the wording of this statute. It says even teaching the necessity. Well, that's how we were founded. At some point, there is a need to overthrow a government violently if needed. Are we saying that here? No. And I'm glad you clarified. We are not doing that. But if you look at the word of the statute, it really has a chilling effect on teaching principles of overthrow when needed, particularly when you explain how egregious the violations of their respecting of the restraints that were put upon them are at this point today.
And it's all and what I advocate is exactly what happened in June of 2016 when the majority of people in Great Britain peacefully seceded from the European Union. That was an act of secession. And in fact, you remember, Suzanne, probably I think maybe a year or two earlier, Scotland had made a big attempt to secede from the empire as well, from Great Britain, and it was done peacefully. Even I remember Tony Blair going. It wasn't Tony Blair. It was who was the other prime? I can't remember the prime minister's name, but he went up
May.
there. Yeah, no, not Theresa May. It was a guy before her. He went up there and said, this is your decision to make. We want you to be part of us, but if you don't want to be part of us, then we're going to respect your decision. I think we need to help people see that in the 21st century, these discussions can actually be peaceful discussions, and actually they should be peaceful discussions. The only element of violence that would be interjected in this would be the megalomaniacs. And that is a conversation worthy of having. I don't believe that will happen myself. But it is certainly a topic of consideration. I think the more we can advocate for peaceful secession, peaceful dismantling, and explain how that happens and then what comes from that, I think we are way morally superior to anything that's going on right now. So let me walk you through it real quickly. Again, I want to take you back to 1774. They were ready to throw off the king. That was the terminology they used. They were throwing him off. But something was going to replace it. Obviously, there was going to be some organizational elements to this new society that would emerge after they threw off the king. They had to sit down and begin to think about it. And actually, they did in 1776. They began to codify their beliefs in what we now refer to as the Articles of Confederation. How were we going? David Cameron, thank you very much. That's who it was that went up there. And actually, back to the Scottish secession, I listened to his speech. It was warm. It was touching. It was genuine as he's speaking to leaders up there who were threatening to secede. He stood there and said, "We love you. You're part of us. It'll be a missing hole if you're not here, but ultimately it's your decision to make." Now, they voted to stay in union with Great Britain. Fine, fair enough. They agreed to do it. But they also, the people in Scotland at least had a lot more knowledge than we do, a lot more understanding about freedom than we do. They at least knew they could do it. We, on the other hand, we hear these words. It's like, we can't do that because America's a Christian nation and God gave us all this stuff gets all confused in people's heads. And so it blocks us from having these discussions. So back to 1774, they start to move to throw off their current tyranny as they understood it. They create the Articles of Confederation to codify how these 13 states are now going to relate to each other. What kind of government? They had to at some point sat and said, you know, I wonder if we should have a central government. And if so, what should it look like? I mean, you have to ask those questions to be able to write what you wrote in the Articles of Confederation, the first Constitution. They began to talk about relationships between the states. How were they going to function with each other? How were they going to respect each other? How were they going to defend each other? They had so you've got to see that in that document were probably 100 conversations beforehand in some room where they said, how should we defend each other? How should we come to each other's aid? If one is attacked, does that mean we're all attacked? Those questions. Those discussions were had. What we're advocating over here on the Cerberus Radio Network, on our show, Mark and Suzanne show, and many other shows on this network, is hey, let's have those conversations. Let's have those. What is better than this? Because if this is the standard of good, folks, we have some bizarre definition of good. Like I said earlier, we're murdering legally 63 million babies so far, 3,000 today, 20 here in Oklahoma. We steal trillions of dollars every year. Probably, I don't even know what the count is, but I've heard at some point, but it's like millions stolen every second of every day of your hard-earned money. And all of these things are happening. We've got, it's funny, I posted something this morning, Suzanne, on Facebook, and inevitably it turns into, well, China and Russia are going to attack us.
I was just going to mention that, because if we were to break up and to decentralize, China and Russia are coming. They're coming right in. You know, when we were under the Articles of Confederation, we defeated the mightiest military force there was. Constitutionally, we have a military. What we have done is turned it loose on the entire world. Who was it Leon Panetta that was testifying before Congress? Somebody, I don't remember the person for sure, but I remember the quote. The defense industry needs stability. You and I get up in the morning, go to work, we pay our taxes, apparently, so the defense industry has stability. You know, speaking of taxes, every minute of every day that we are alive, we are accruing money that we owe to the government, our debt, our property taxes. Let's see, our taxes to pay for other people's medical care. And anytime you buy fuel, anytime you purchase something, there are taxes at local levels. I mean, we are taxed every minute, every day. What we do have left over, by the time we finally die, that's taxed if we want to leave it to our children. We live to tax the government. And this is the problem too, how our families have become so dysfunctional. What led the push to get women out of the homes and into the workplace? What's the benefit of getting the women out of the homes? They can earn revenue and pay taxes to their governments. And then the double whammy for the government is they will take over the children's education and become a government-sanctioned daycare center and use this control and a captive audience, compelling children to go to school, by the way, the public schools, to indoctrinate them all to embracing government. And by the way, as Andrew says, politicians survive and thrive by making our chains more comfortable, not by helping us break them, which is the point of education in the public school system. We've done shows about that. Jeff, did you want to say something?
Well, I just was going to read some Patrick Henry about taxation.
Go. We love our Patrick Henry.
Yeah. I believe you will find no reduction of the public burdens by this new system. The splendid maintenance of the president and of the members of both houses, and the salaries and fees of the swarm of officers and dependents of the government will cost this continent immense sums. It goes on, but I'll leave it there.
Well, he was prophetic in so many ways about what was coming, and it's upon us now.
They
And
all were, weren't they?
They were, and yet we want, Suzanne. It's just the weirdest thing, and I was guilty of it, so I can't say I'm Mr. Above criticism here. But there's something that forces us to want to stay in that 3x5 card of acceptable political opinion. I don't know if it's just inertia. I don't know if it's status quo. I don't know if it's nostalgia. I don't know if it's brainwashing. Maybe it's all of it. Maybe all of it.
Or we get tired of sitting alone. I get tired of sitting alone at social functions.
That's exactly right. That's the benefit of Facebook, right?
The table inevitably clears within 5 minutes of me opening my mouth. If somebody starts talking politics, this happened. We were actually at the KOA in Estes Park on our trip to Colorado. And there was a group of people talking in the breakfast area, and the guy was making breakfast for everybody. And they're talking politics. I thought, nope, not going to do it. Not going to do it. And when I came back to sit down, this one gentleman said, well, Thomas Jefferson said that debt was good because it made people work harder. And I just couldn't help myself. And I said, actually, Thomas Jefferson said it was immoral for one generation to bind future generations in debt. And this other table started laughing. And I said, seriously, if we're gonna wax Jefferson, let's at least be realistic here. Yeah. Well, within a few minutes of me sitting down, poof, everyone vanished.
And this is our problem, but this is why we're glad you're joining us here on this network. We know our numbers continue to go up. Why? Because we're having these conversations, and you're here because you really do want to have these conversations. You do want to explore with me and Suzanne and Jeff and all the other hosts on this network. What is better? Is there better? Number one, let's just begin. Is there a better system than what we have? Or is this really the best? Is this it? Have we hit pay dirt with this system of government we have right now?
And that's what people tell us. If you don't like it, come up with something better. Well, we have. Mark, when there was talk of California seceding and their hissy fit with President Trump, they weren't taking up arms. Jerry Brown wasn't calling forth the militia. Right. He wasn't telling people to organize and grab what firearms they allowed them to still have. We didn't see it. They were talking about peaceful secession. Oh, and by the way, we'll come back as soon as somebody we like is president. That is such an insane conflation of the powers of the president to say millions of people, tens of millions of people are going to leave the union because they disagree with who the president is. Also, the Confederated States of America left peacefully. They didn't declare war. And the revisionist historians, the victors telling the story, even lie about the name of the war. It wasn't a civil war. A civil war, as we've said many times, is when two or more factions compete for how a government is going to be run, how people are going to be ruled. That wasn't the case. They just said, please, how can we clear out our debts? How can we make this work? How can we resolve this peacefully? And we're going to go and you do what you want. We're going to do what we want. We're going to resolve the issues that we have plaguing our culture. We know that they're there, but we have to resolve this on our own. By the way, these tariffs that you're imposing upon us, totally egregious, constitutional, but within a contract, within a compact, you assume people are going to act reasonably and fairly. The taxes and the oppression that the southern states were experiencing to finance projects in the northern states was the reason they left. And when they said, look, we need to leave, Lincoln said, I can't allow them to leave. They fund the government. The government. That's why he went to war, to fund the government.
And this brings us back full circle to this discussion about what is better. Now, culturally, we are different. There's no way to suggest any other way. We are a different cultural group of people. We are diverse, and I like the diversity. It's why we get to have Italian food, and why I eat Ethiopian food, and why I get to see Indian presentations down here. We are culturally very different, and I love that. I like diversity, but that's not what I'm talking about. We have got something really special going on here in that regard. What I'm talking about is that thing, that entity, begins with G, and it has become a cuss word in my mind, government. It is that entity that we need to discuss and say, is this the best we have? I think we've got a lot going on culturally in this country. We have a lot of diversity going on. I love it. And just in Oklahoma City, we have an arts district down there. I love going down to the arts district and seeing what people who are very different from me do with their skills and talents. It's just pretty cool to see that. So I'm not interested in, I'll change the culture through the gospel, sharing the good news of salvation through Jesus Christ. But you can't use government for that purpose, because it can't do that. It can just force people to comply, because at the end of the day, government is force. Now, with that as kind of the backdrop, is this the best system of government ever known to mankind that we have right now? And I think the evidence would be crystal clear. No, it's not. So what might be better? Okay, Kreslins, I'll bite. I'll bite that this is not the best. What's better, bozo? Huh? Well, I'm going to tell you what I think is better. And certainly there's evidence around the world of where it is functioning better. Now, there's a couple of approaches to this. There's philosophical approaches to this. And then there's kind of an analytical approach to this. What's going on right now? Is there some example somewhere where we might be able to see where there's more freedom, where there's more consent to the governed, if that is some foundational principle, which I tend to adhere to, by the way, consent to the governed. I think that's one of the most brilliant concepts I've ever heard. Is it hard to put into practice? Yeah, it is, of course. It doesn't preclude us from thinking about how to do it. So I want to talk about one approach to government that I have embraced for quite a few years now. It's called the Night Watchman, Minarchy, however you want to describe it. It's a minimalist government. It accepts the fact that we have to have some government, but let me describe what I mean there, because I know as soon as people say, well, there goes Kresl's some is a subjective term. What does he mean by that? I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. You only have courts. That's it. Courts to adjudicate contract disputes and remove bad guys from the society that are doing bad things. So in other words, they sentence them somewhere. Now, you need one other element of government, and that is some force to go and get the bad guys so they can stand in front of the court, and the court can say, you can't be in our community anymore because you do one of three things. And I would restrict government by some charter to three functions when it comes to getting bad guys: murderers, rapists, and thieves. And that's it. That's no more speeding tickets, no more SEPA, no more code enforcement, no more county zoning measures. All that disappears. That's all gone. We don't live by some bureaucrat in some office in some non-disclosed building writing regulations, controlling Suzanne's property and what she wants to do with it. All of that is gone unless you want it. Now, if you want to live in a small republic and you love all that, then have at it. Then build that kind of republic. But this Night Watchman idea, this minarchist idea, really is only effective in republics. And by the way, folks, stop claiming the United States as a republic. It's a total oxymoron. There's no such thing as a 320 million person republic. If you think there is, it just betrays you don't know what a republic is. You don't know where those concepts came from. When they have emerged in human history, they have always been small when they function properly.
You know, Mark, when you mentioned that, this is the thing. We had Tom Mullen on. We've talked about the Pledge of Allegiance many times. And when you point out the fact that, first of all, you're pledging allegiance to something other than God, that's fine. There's some atheists out there. Again, one nation, indivisible was not, we tell them about the founding principles as in direct contravention to what was agreed to at the time. Well, to me, I stand to the republic for which it stands. They've got to cling. Their little fingernails are just breaking, clinging to this concept. The republic for which it stands. We were never a republic. We were a confederation of republics United States. And people just don't want to get out of the comfort zone of what they have been told is true. And, you know, we're getting some people to come around here. But you mentioned a couple things also about different cultures and diversity. We know that the colonies, which became the states, were different. They recognized that, which is why they didn't want a strong central government, which is why they didn't want to become the United States of America, which is why King George signed a treaty stating each one of them by name, which is why we have Article 7 showing us that the Constitution was ratified by the states. The states created the general government, which John Taylor of Caroline said was an ultimate act of their sovereignty. They could reassert that sovereignty by taking this government away, abolishing it altogether. They can get together under an Article 5 convention and say, Washington, D.C. is no more. Speaking of these people as being prophetic, John Taylor of Caroline also said, beware of the unholy alliance between government and finance. And boy, are we not seeing that today. So recognizing we have these different cultures. And if you don't think we do, drive across this continental landmass. Yeah. I've driven through Oklahoma. You see billboards about Jesus everywhere. You know that that is a very Christian state. Drive through Nevada and you will see billboards with 800 numbers so you know where to go and get your abortion. Why is it? Because of it, political expediency and wanting to secure the female vote. We have a Supreme Court decision mandating that Nevada gets its way across this continental landmass. So we have cultures, different cultures. We have diversity, yet we have a government that demands diversity, respect for diversity, but seeks to and does impose a one-size-fits-all solution for 320 plus million people. They are speaking out of both sides of their mouths, and nobody but us here are calling them on this inconsistency, on this blatant hypocrisy. This is why what we're trying to do here is so important. I don't know if you got to watch that video. We'll have some sound clips of it next time, but we'll post it up. It's called Slab City. It's a place out in Southern California, out in the desert. The state owned the land. I think it used to be a military base, but the name comes from these concrete slabs, and people park their motorhomes out there. There is no government whatsoever. It is a completely voluntary system. Now, is it a beautiful place to hang out? No, but they actually call this the last free place in America. And it is people that are poor, people that they admit are crazy. It is a place where crazy people can go and live in peace, where they're not arrested, where they're not pulled off the streets and taken against their will. Yeah, there's garbage out there. There is no, but the interesting thing is absence of government does not necessarily mean absence of the rule of law. These people know they can't go and kill each other or rape the women or steal from each other. And like you said, murder, rape, and thieves are the ones. That's the proper role of government. These people are self-governing. And here's where we have a slippery slope now. The state's talking about purchasing the land or putting the land up for sale. Well, we need to organize so we can buy this land. Yeah, and now we're going to have to come up with a way to clean up the trash. Well, here's an idea. How about somebody take some of their money, go out and buy some hefty bags and pick up your own trash? Yeah. You don't, but this is a slippery slope. We see it going from probably what happened with tribalism. Well, we have some leaders we need to come about. So the question begets, how much government do you want to have? And we have the minarchists. I love that. I love the smaller government, the better. And when they say, what is your solution? I like this smaller, limited government where people can, Mark, we've talked about this. These people voluntarily associate on a daily basis. It shows them getting ready to have a prom, a dance. They have music, they have dancing, they have cooperation. People just hanging out, talking about not living under debt because of all the taxes imposed upon them by the government. Heck, I want to go put my RV out there.
And I love this kind of conversation. You know why? Because We don't care what the Constitution says about any of this conversation. It doesn't matter. It's a bad system. What is a better system is what you just described, voluntarism. Now, we do that. We voluntarily associate every single day. I've gone through this many times on this radio network and others I've been on. We do it already. We already do it. This is the great frustration, isn't it? Because our natural inclination is to voluntarily cooperate with each other. I am not a Thomas Hobbesian. I don't believe Rousseau that man in a state of nature is just going to be viciously breaking into each other's. I'm going across the street right now. I'm going to rip my neighbor off. That's not my state of nature. Not even as a Christian. I know non-Christians, many non-Christians, who in a state of nature would never say, I'm taking that. I'm going to murder that guy or I'm going to rape his wife. No, I don't know people who think that way. But political and then ultimately governmental systems are often built on that flawed, faulty idea that man in a state of nature will ravage each other. Now, that said, there is always a small group, a percentage of any population that are going to murder, rape, and steal. That's just a part of the fallen nature of man. So in a voluntary society, do you create a huge government that then grows and grows and grows until it owns everything so you can have some sense of security? Or do you just deal with the actual problem that is there, the murderers, the rapists, and the thieves? Why do you have zoning? Because you didn't constrain government. Why do you have speed limits and speeding tickets and all that garbage? Because you didn't restrain government. Government will grow unless you clearly limit its power. Now, the only way to do that, folks, is in a small, mutually consented to society. Defined by some kind of border. That's the only way you're going to do this. So, as I have advocated for years on other networks, we have 3,108 counties in this country. Why not have 3,108 states? So somebody tell me what is inherently wrong with that. Now, I know what I'm going to hear. Well, what about China?
Russia and China. Well, they're going to march right
in and take over. Folks, knock it off with that. We heard the same thing.
We heard the same thing with California. Well, if California secedes, China's going to come invade them. And my response to that, I think I said that with you in there. We can't even mind our own business on the other side of the planet. Do you think this government is going to sit by and allow California to be invaded? No. And hey, we have things called treaties. We had a treaty calling for self-defense, mutual self-defense before under the Articles. Just because we decentralize the government doesn't mean we lose our ability to defend ourselves. What we're going to surrender is the ability for these megalomaniacs to reign terror under the auspices of spreading democracy amongst people who have no desire to have us in their neighborhood, banging down their doors to see if they have firearms or possible terrorists in their homes. I would not be happy. You know, these people that support this are the ones saying, I'll be shooting holes through blue helmets if the UN shows up here in the United States. You know, we won't tolerate having happened to us what we are raining down on the rest of this world. And the fact that we are glorifying John McCain since he passed shows that we still are embracing these notions. This man was no hero. This man was a villain in Congress. He knowingly denied his constituents representation. As we said last time we were together, these people think that these seats to which they are elected become their property. They belong to them. Even after they leave, by golly, they're going to get their government benefits. They're going to get their pensions and pay. They're going to get rewards beyond which we could ever even imagine not working in government. And what do they do to deserve it? I'm trying to figure that out.
Well, To your analysis is spot on. They don't deserve anything. They don't have a claim to that, though they think they do. We do have a kind of an aristocracy in our country, and it is the political ruling class. Folks, we have now here on this show in this last hour offered concrete solutions. We actually put forward solutions. We don't just complain about the obvious. It's why I don't do that. It's why I stopped doing that, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, Suzanne. I don't complain about the obvious. It's like, well, okay, we all can agree it's a mess. How do we fix it? We've put forth concrete solutions. I want to break the United States up into 3,108 states. How many are with me? I think many of those little states would confederate with each other, and I think that they would create a defense force to defend their interests. You know what they would do? They would willingly tax themselves to buy F-18 fighter jets. Folks, don't buy the propaganda from the vast military industrial complex and your government that without them, China is just a boat away. I want you to stop and just reason with me for a moment. Just imagine the premier of China sits in an office somewhere and says, you know, they broke into 3,108 states over there. I think it's time to go and take over and occupy the United States of America. I think that's, now don't forget, we still have all this military hardware that has been built that could be purchased by these confederated states. But never mind that. Okay, let's pretend most of these 3,100 states have confederated some way together to have some minimalist defense, not for offensive military operations, but truly for defensive operations. So the premier says they're in a weakened condition because they decentralized from Washington, D.C. down to these 3,108. Let's launch. Now, I want you to stop and think about what it would take to truly occupy the United States of America. Think of the boats it would take to transport the troops across the Pacific Ocean without us knowing about it, without anybody knowing about it. Now, remember, we have confederated together and we've created a defense force. And the radar says, excuse me, Confederation, there's 14,000 ships, which of course China doesn't have, but let's just pretend they do. And they're all loaded with troops and they're headed our way.
Oh, if only we were one nation indivisible, we could do something about it.
Bring back Washington. No, but seriously, folks, think of the ridiculous lengths you have to go to support the idea that China would attack us, which is a nebulous term. What does that actually mean? Well, if they ICBM us, well, we're all in trouble. If anybody ICBMs anybody, you know, take the nuclear option off the table. If we've demonstrated anything in our Western sanity or a human sanity, we have not launched at each other in some way beyond what we did in Japan and Nagasaki, and hopefully that taught lessons that will never cross over. That doesn't say we're not going to, but you don't really have a defense to ICBMs. Technology may at some point give us that ability, and then that takes that weapon off the table. But let's go to just basic realities of China or Russia attacking us in some conventional way and then occupying us. Now, you've got, Suzanne, you probably know this number better than I do, but I think I've heard somewhere around 220 million weapons in the United States, privately owned weapons. We still have the F-18s from when the Washington was dismantled and we broke into 3,108 states. We still have all the firepower it didn't disappear. It's still located somewhere, and various confederations are buying that equipment because they want to defend themselves. So we have all these weapons personally owned. We have all this defense mechanism that is now owned by the people of the confederations. What is the chance of China truly attacking us? It strains credulity to believe they can. And yet the fear mongers in the vast military industrial complex want you to believe that's going to happen tomorrow. If Washington, D.C. got bulldozed, we're speaking Chinese the next day.
I also read a statistic that said that private citizens owned more firearms than the military. And there are still a lot of people that would resist. I mean, of course. Didn't anybody see Red Dawn?
Of course we would. So we sit on our hands while we know a fleet of 14,000 Chinese troop-laden carriers are coming across the Pacific Ocean. We all start quaking and sit on our hands and say, well, let's not do anything. Come on, folks. Washington wants you to believe that. The vast military industrial complex wants you to believe that. Of course you'd fight back. And number one, they don't even have how would they move? We have 320 million people in this country. Do you realize how many millions of troops it would take to conquer and then occupy this place? That's assuming for them to do this, we actually would have had to just open the door. Because if the shooting starts and we degrade their military by 30% and they only sent 1 million, how is 700,000 people on some kind of, they have to sleep, are going to occupy 320 million people across this landmass? Folks, you think about this. You're being propagandized. You've been propagandized. Our show is about trying to open your mind. Think differently about the problem. The solution is not in the 3x5 card of politically accepted opinion. There's no solution there. None. The
Let me ask
is outside that.
A quick question that I want people to take some time and think about. How different do you think this world would be if the control of our military capabilities was decentralized? Do you think it would be more peaceful? Do you think it would be less peaceful? I have my opinion. Think about that. Do you think we would be freer? Would we be less free? Would we be paying less taxes? Would our military actually exist for the purposes it's supposed to defend ourselves instead of looking after American interests abroad? I think it's something that people don't even entertain that notion. Well, what if we decentralize control of the military? As Andrew says, balkanization, yes, please, in all capital letters. Yeah, and we do have, we're just not a couple, we're a couple of lunatics, but we're not a couple of lunatics talking to each other. There are people that are going, yeah, you know what? This actually does make sense. Some people will just say, Suzanne, I listened to your show and we don't agree on everything. And I know the holding points for them are the flag. These people have relatives that served in the military. Mark, you're a veteran. The stuff that we are saying is not anathema to you. You understand this. And, just because we're talking about breaking this down doesn't mean we disrespect those individuals that have participated in the military. We're not saying that. We're saying, wouldn't our lives be better if we were a smaller government? They're talking about secession. If Lincoln hadn't stomped the CSA down, called an army, gathered up recruits while Congress wasn't even in session, people would be wondering, the free market would drive the states back. The government would realize, okay, we're sorry. What we did, that was wrong. Let's readdress this tariff issue. And then they would realize that states would leave and they would lose that revenue. They would lose that support if they threw off their constraints. Now we have this new federalism with grants. Well, you're not going to get the money that you sent to us and we laundered, and we're going to return to you pennies on the dollar if you don't have your speed limits or your drinking age or your firearms laws, you name it. This is why this event in Dallas is so important about nullification and secession. We're down to a minute. This has been a great show, folks. Think about the principles. Mark, I'm going to let you bring it on home. I want to thank everybody for joining us today.
Well, folks, we are glad. Continue to recommend this to your friends if they've got the guts for it, because we are not holding back on this show. You heard an hour of it just now, but you've heard many other hours. These are the conversations we need to have, folks. It saddens me. It really saddens me that too often these conversations get defined by force. Somebody's going to kill somebody. Somebody's going to shoot somebody. Usually the government shooting somebody. Folks, let's be positive about what could come. Some really good things could come, but it only happens if we join together and have these kinds of conversations. I am Mark. She is Suzanne. We'll see you around the corner.